Hey, this is David with the ACME Kitchen Crate. I wanted to start doing some cooking demos and showing off some of the different products. So what I'm going to do today is show off a deep fry batter that I use for fish, vegetables, all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of a beer batter with some different kind of tweaks and stuff to it that makes it extra crispy, because I'm a crispy texture guy. So every time I do anything deep fry, if it's not shatteringly crisp, it's going in the garbage. So I'm using cauliflower and onion rings here today. Like I said, I use the same batter with all different kinds of fried foods, and I think it's really versatile and work with most things that you'll come across. I'm using kind of a secret ingredient today that I actually don't have too much experience with, so it's going to be a bit of a test on it. But this is a stuff called EverCrisp, and it's a special kind of starch that when you mix it in with your regular flours and starches, it helps to prolong the crispiness for the product. So that way you can actually let it sit out for, they claim up to 4 hours it'll stay crispy. That's kind of a nice little thing from Modernist Pantry. So we'll kind of give it a test here today with some of my usual batter ingredients and see how it goes. For my deep fry, I always do a double fry. So I'm going to go ahead and start my Breville here. I'm going to do, for the first fry, I'm going to go ahead and set it to I'll do 340. Really, I want more of like a 325 temp, but I want to allow some extra height for that way. Once I put the ingredients in, the oil temp is going to drop. Then as it drops, it'll actually hit the temp I want. On this guy, I'm going to set him to probe control. I've got my probe here into the oil. I got a little binder clip as my little trick for just using to hold these into the oil on any kind of stock pots and stuff. I'm going to leave that covered while it heats up. So we'll start with prepping the cauliflower. So let me take all these ribs off. And then I've got my big chef's knife here. I want to just cut out this center without necessarily slicing through all the florets, because I want to maintain them to be large pieces. I don't want little tiny chunks for deep frying.
Who makes the chef knife?
So this is my carbon steel from Steelport, which is my favorite of the chef's knives that I personally use. Stays super sharp. Got a great handle feel to it. With the cauliflower especially, it's a pretty dense piece in vegetable, and so you don't want it to be too large. Otherwise, it's not going to fully cook when you deep fry it. So you do want to get it in small enough pieces that it will cook all the way through. We don't want to get too much of the core on there. That way, I've seen some recipes with this where they actually kind of like par cook the cauliflower. I don't think it's really necessary, and then you're dealing with extra moisture and stuff from the boiling and whatnot. I don't want to have to do that, so I'd rather just make sure it's small enough of pieces that you're not going to have a problem cooking it all the way through. And then, since I've already got the fry batter going, I wanted to also just do something else. And, always have onions in the house. So, onion rings is just a nice, easy, thing to be able to quickly throw into fry oil and get something that everyone really enjoys. So usually I'm going for about 1/2 inch slices. Is going to give you a good chunky onion ring. It's perfect. To get the best adhesion on the batter, we typically want to get a little bit of a flour dredge going. So the way I like to do is I just throw everything into one big bowl and then flour everything in the bowl all at once. So these, I'm using the Pyrex. This is my mixing bowl set of glassware, which is really great for this kind of prep work and things. Good mix of sizes. I will use multiple of them for my breading station, or batter station in this case. All right, now that our veg is prepped and this is almost at temp, I'm going to go ahead and start making the beer batter. You want to kind of do the batter last thing right before you cook, because we're doing a batter where you want to keep it cold. And I just literally pulled this beer. I left it in the freezer for about 20 minutes just to make sure it's as chill as possible. And as soon as we put everything together, we really want to start cooking right away because it just kind of starts to deflate the batter a little bit the longer it sits. So we're going to go ahead and get this going. Typically, most people are going to want to measure everything out super precisely. Batters and stuff like this, I really don't find them to be that fussy, and I don't want to make it a fussy thing. So for me, I kind of just do everything in ratios. So I can tell just kind of by looking at it or using my 1 spoon as I'm scooping what is going to be my proper amount. So I'll kind of walk you through how I do it. So with this type of batter, I want to go 4-to-1 as far as the flour and the EverCrisp, and then about another 1/2 to 1 portion of the cornstarch. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 1 spoon, 2, 3, 4. I'm using bread flour here, which will potentially give a little bit extra crisp, but it's not necessarily required. I'll go ahead and give 1 scoop of our EverCrisp. And kind of a 1/2 scoop. I gotta go a little touch more of cornstarch. And with that, I'm gonna add just a little bit of baking powder. It's probably like a 1/4 teaspoon or so, just a dash. And let's add some spices. So I'm gonna do, I got garlic powder, onion powder, and some hot paprika. There we go. Got some onion powder. Do some black pepper. And gotta have salt. I'm gonna add a decent amount of salt here to the batter, and then we're gonna salt as well at the end when we pull it out. Now we can go ahead and add the beer. So you want to do this in portions so that way you don't overdo it, because otherwise it's a lot harder to remove a liquid from a batter than it is to add more. And we want it to be not too thick. We want it fairly thin. A saying that I'd heard and from another chef years ago was you want it to almost look like a good latex paint when it's done. So you should have a good amount of liquidity to it, but it shouldn't be completely runny. So the one thing that the beer also does is it also adds some sugar to the batter, which is what's going to also improve browning and flavor. There we go. That looks good.
Now, obviously, any beer they want to use, they can use, right?
Yeah, you typically, you want something that's going to complement flavoring wise. I tend to find a lot of lighter beers work well. You can get into like an amber or something. You don't want something too dark. I wouldn't necessarily normally use a stout or something like that because it's probably going to add too much sugar to the batter. You might risk over browning. But, you've got options there. One other thing that the beer also does is it adds a little bit of alcohol content, and that also assists in the crisping up of things. You'll find that in some other recipes and stuff where sometimes they'll say to add a little vodka or something like that, because the vodka will quickly evaporate once it hits the oil and it creates more bubbles. So the little bit of alcohol in this also kind of acts as an assistance there. So you kind of see our texture now. It's a good, it's thin, but it's not, milky thin. It's still got some body to it, and that should be just perfect for what we're doing here. So now what we want to do is we want to give a bit of a pre-dredge of flour. So this basically kind of helps suck up some of the moisture that's on the surface and give the batter a better chance to actually adhere to the vegetables themselves. So you just get a light dusting on everything. It's nothing crazy, but just enough just to give the batter a little assistance. Our preheat is ready just in time. And I'm just going to go straight in from one right into the other. Don't really need to let it sit at all or rest or anything. Again, we want to keep this kind of as fresh and as cold as possible, so the quicker we can kind of move things around, the better. I'm going to start with the cauliflower because it's going to take the longest to cook. So I'm going to get a few in the bowl first, and then I'll kind of transfer a bunch at once. That way they'll all kind of cook at the same time. So one of the kind of key things that I have here is I'm actually using, a lot of people have a 5.5 quart Dutch oven. I'm using a 7 1/4, and I really love that for frying. The big benefit is it's a wider opening, but I've got more volume, so I can have more oil in there. I'm gonna have less chance of overcrowding or the heat dropping with the larger piece, but I still have enough room that it's not gonna over spill over. So I really have found that the 7 1/4 is a much better size for deep frying than a 5 1/2 if you can get that. All right. So we want to fully drain off any excess and into our fry wheel. I really like these Rosal tongs for this. It just gives you a little bit more precision. You don't get your fingers all wet with the batter. While that's par frying, we can go ahead and get started on prepping the next batch. I'm going to go ahead and just start doing some onion rings now. So, have to have a spider strainer, only option for deep frying. I really like the Rosal one. Nice handle, it's a good size. I can kind of check how this is looking. And I mean, that's looking fantastic. You just see how much it's puffed up. It's going to be just super light and crispy, I can tell. So in this case here, and you can see my temp has actually dropped to 318, even though I originally had it set to 340. So you can see, even with a decent amount of volume, you're still going to get some temp drop. So that's why I started it at that higher temp. You know, anything 315 to 325 for cooking at this first level absolutely is perfect. So, you know, we did a good job as far as hitting our temperatures that we wanted to be able to get this first par cooked. All right, so this has been frying now for about 4 minutes, and looking fantastic. So we're already getting some good color on the outside, but we'll get more in the final fry. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out and drain it onto just my wire cooking grid. I've got it turned upside down onto some paper towels, which will help draw some of the extra oil away from it. Not as big of a deal yet, since we are going to fry this one more time in a little bit, but you know, it helps and it's kind of just good practice. So let's go ahead and I'm going to give this another couple minutes to come back up to 340 before I start the onion rings. All right, now that my oil's come back to temp, I'm ready to go ahead and do the onion rings. I want to show one other little trick that I use. So I've got also this other strainer that's got a finer mesh. One of the things I like is, you know, we have these like little guys that we're just, you know, process of dropping everything in. This one with the tighter mesh is a great piece for just a quick cleanup. And you can even sometimes add a little bit of cheesecloth or something to it to make it even finer, if depending on what you got. But it's just a nice way to kind of clean up these other things that otherwise will start kind of burning into the oil and potentially give you an off taste in the oil itself. So now that we're prepped, let's go ahead and just give these another quick little toss, and we can go ahead and start dropping in our onion rings. Give those a few minutes here to cook. All right, onion rings look good for the first cook. These don't take as long as the cauliflower does because they are smaller. But you can see we're just kind of starting to get a good little bit of color on them. So now we'll just continue that process until we kind of work our way through all the product. All right, we are ready for the second deep fry. So this has kind of all been resting now for probably almost 20 minutes or so. It doesn't necessarily need to be quite that long. But the whole point of a deep fry is once you fry something, what ends up happening is it sits and the moisture within starts to then kind of steam out and it kind of resogs out the crust. So by hitting it with a second fry, it kind of just gets that first amount of steam that originally comes off the very hot center and gets rid of it, fries it out of the crust again, and then by that point you're at a more comfortable eating temp, so it's not going to steam up as easily again. So you're going to get a much longer lasting hold time. I mean, you'll notice with this right now, I mean, we still have texture. Like it's not completely sogged out, but we're definitely going to get more with the second fry. So I've raised the heat on this. I'm aiming for around 375, so in this case, like I said, I overshoot it, so I have it at 380, so that way, as I put the food in there, it's going to drop. It's not going to drop as much since the food's still pretty warm, but, you know, I'd rather have a little bit extra just to get going. So let's go ahead and start doing some of this cauliflower.
I noticed you're not using your tongs this time.
Yeah, since I don't have the wet batter in my hands, I'm just better with my hands. I'm just quicker that way. I mean, if you want to, you can use the tongs all the time.
Gotcha.
I just don't.
I was just curious.
You also are less concerned with overcrowding, again, since there's less, since the product's already pretty hot and it's already cooked, it's not going to stick to each other. I feel more comfortable throwing more in at once, so I'm a little less worried about that. And I've got my salt ready for seasoning once it's right out of the fryer. You want it to be kind of still that moist texture coming out so that the salt actually sticks to it. I'm using Diamond Crystal here. I actually really like Diamond Crystal, especially for this kind of thing. It's a large enough flake that it's going to stick to the food without it falling right off like a Morton's kosher might, but it's, you know, still got a little texture to it. It's not just a complete, you know, small salt.
You said Diamond Crystal, right?
Yeah, Diamond Crystal. Yeah. So I've actually got some of it right there. All right. So you see just about a minute and it's done. You got a great color on it. That looks perfect. You can see the difference in color between the first fry and the second fry. So you're getting a lot more of that, you know, caramelization. And then, I mean, that's just ultra crispy. And that should hold its crispiness now, and we shouldn't have as much issue. So now that it's out, let me go ahead and hit it with some of my kosher salt. And we're good to go. The other big benefit of a double fry is, you know, I'm less concerned. I can get through this a lot faster. A lot of times when you're doing frying, sometimes you're going to put it into a warm oven to hold while you're cooking everything else. With a double fry, I can kind of pre-cook everything, get it all sitting, and then I just have to do the second fry real quick to service. And I'm not so concerned about, okay, if this sits for 2-3 minutes, it's not going to cool down enough where it's going to be a problem. So it's just a better process for me. I dirty less things. I don't have to start an oven. So that's why I'm kind of a fan of deep double frying on almost anything, because it's just also better for timing. I'm going to go ahead and just keep frying off the rest of this, and I'll show you the final result in the end. All right, just finished the last batch of this, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a final dusting of salt here, using my RSVP Salt Keeper that I love. Really nice and easy to use. Let's go ahead and start plating it up. So I'm going to go ahead and I got a nice platter here. You can just hear how crispy everything is. Get our cauliflower. And then anything fried food is better with some kind of lemon or citrus. So definitely a great thing to be able to kind of serve with. So you can kind of sprinkle on top. Then from there, we can kind of sauce it up. I'm a big fan of pantry sauces where I just kind of grab a few things that I'm feeling at the time out of the kitchen, put it together, and just make a sauce. So a great base for anything is always going to be mayonnaise. And so I've got my cutie pie mayo, which is a fantastic mayonnaise to use for kind of almost anything. It's got a little bit more vinegar in it than like a Hellmann's or something like that. So give a little squirt of that. I've got a fantastic Sriracha here called Racha Sriracha. This is actually from a friend of mine who's bottling this. It's all high quality, fresh ingredients. You know, it's definitely a sauce you would refrigerate, not one that you leave out on the counter. A little Mike's Hot Honey, get a little sweet heat. And then I'm a texture guy, so I've got a little chili crisp to go ahead and add as well, to add a little something there. So just kind of doing everything by eye and to taste. So we'll give this a little stir and see how it turns out and adjust as necessary. All right. Wow, that's actually really good. Fantastic. Perfect. Let's plate this up and I think we are good to go. Let's give this a try and see how we did. So, I mean, you can already just tell just how crispy this is. I mean, you can just layers of shatteringly crisp and just very, very light and thin. It's not a super heavy crust, which is great. Perfect. Absolutely fantastic. Let me go ahead and give a little squirt of lemon. And try a piece of the cauliflower here with our sauce. Excellent. Really love how crispy this is, but still super light. I'll go ahead and post in the description below kind of roughly what I'm doing measurement-wise. I don't have it down to a science, but I think we're on the right path of what we're doing with the ratios as far as the EverCrisp and our mixed starches and stuff like that. So definitely highly recommend this batter. Definitely keep tuned to our channels, like and subscribe, because we're going to be doing a lot more of these cooking videos and experiments and stuff. So definitely please take a look at that. And then I got to feed my crew because we've been filming all day. So let me pass off some here. So, gotta give this a try. So what's great with this sauce too is it's something that like you don't need to necessarily plan it out. It's just whatever you're doing, you kind of are feeling that day, and then you just kind of adjust to fit. Don't overthink it. You know, it's one of those things. Sometimes I get a recipe where I'm like, this looks fantastic, and it's got 50 ingredients, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna take more time to make the sauce than I am to make the batter for this. So that's why I love just doing something different.
I have to say though, the sauce was my idea.
Absolutely was.
It's so crispy.
Oh. Check out more videos from us over on the links over here. All right, we experimented and lifted a couple of these out for it's coming on 3 hours. Oh yeah, fork don't lie. That's definitely still got some crisp. Let's give this a try. Yeah, this is a winner. Definitely helps. I'll put a link in the description on where you can buy this on Amazon.